Happy Halloween from Pacific North Weird. We have for you on this evening, or maybe it's your lunch break when you sneak off to the bathroom to watch Pornhub. Maybe it's your commute to work in the morning, we don't really care. Either way, you're watching Pacific North Weird, and that's what counts. We have 4 tales, bone-chilling, as cold as a Pacific Northwest night in October. 4 tales that haunt my dreams to this very day. Well, not really, I've seen worse, but still, you know, if it's scary to you, that's fine. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we suffer from a constant state of darkness, which causes none other than vitamin D deficiencies. Vitamin D deficiencies that cause things such as black metal music, Norwegians, even suicide. Here's the tale of a poor unfortunate soul living in the Cascade Mountains, forced to do the unspeakable. Sell real estate.
Let me just say, first of all, that North Bend, Washington is weird, and everyone who lives here is half crazy. Now, my parents, on the other hand, are quite normal, and for years now have been in the real estate business, and for a while they had an office in Falls City and an office located in North Bend. In Falls City, one of their agents that we got to know quite well, he became very ill, mentally ill. He became depressed, and it was a very sad situation. He'd come to work and say really bizarre things out of nowhere. He would bump into walls. Sometimes he would be missing for a whole week. He wouldn't show up to work. When he did show up to work, he was lethargic, and he told people he was depressed, just acting very, very strange. And then one afternoon we found out, after church on a Sunday, he drove up on a logging road with a shotgun and he shot himself in the head. He committed suicide. So understandably, everybody was upset and shocked by this news. And, you know, we just didn't understand. Nobody understand. He left a wife and kids behind, and just a tragic thing. So some time went by, and because of the economy, my parents decided to consolidate all of their real estate business into the North Bend office. So they closed down the Falls City office. So my brother, my father, and I were moving furniture, all the remaining furniture, the office desks, the shelving, from Falls City to North Bend. And one of the desks we were trying to load into the doorway, but because the drawer was sticking out, we couldn't quite fit it through the doorway. So I pulled the drawer out and reached behind, and there was a whole bunch of crumpled paper behind the drawer. And we were curious, you know, what was on this paper. And we unfolded the paper, and there before us was a picture. It was a black and white photograph, and it was a man, and he was standing out in the woods. You could see the trees behind him, and his head was tilted just like this, and he was staring at the camera in a really creepy way. This was a photograph of the agent who had committed suicide, and this desk was his desk. Totally freaked out. I took the papers, I crumpled them back up, I threw them in the trash can in the corner, and immediately we heard a voice in the trash can. My brother heard it, I heard it, my dad heard it, and it sounded like someone suffocating or being pinned down or tortured, crying out for help. This voice came up and out of the trash can and floated, and you could hear it in midair as it was rising toward the ceiling. And then it slowly faded away and went into the ceiling, and then it disappeared. and I'll never forget it.
The people of the Pacific Northwest are a people of foot fetishists. Whether it is Bigfoot or the sound of haunting steps, we like it. Here's a story of the footsteps of the dead walking through a hallway in the Grant House in Fort Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Jeff Davis, and we are together in my most famous haunt in the Pacific Northwest, and that is the Grant House restaurant, which is in Vancouver, Washington, at a place called the Vancouver Barracks. This was the first U.S. Army building built here in the Northwest. It dates to 1849. It's now a restaurant, but for many years it was the commander's residence and the post headquarters. The ghost who haunts this place is Colonel Alfred Sully. In the 1870s, he was the post commander here, and we are sitting in his front parlor in the Grant House. Now, Sully was very ill at the end of his life. Some people said he had rheumatism. I personally think that he had stomach cancer. He had terrible cramps, and he would wake up in the middle of the night, and he would pace the hallway on the second floor for hours on end until they could finally get to sleep. Now, on the eve of a visit from Ulysses S. Grant, he was preparing for that as the post commander, and he died in his room before Grant arrived. But we go forward through time, and this building eventually became just an officer's mess, then it became a library, then it became a museum, and for the last couple of decades it's been a restaurant. And in the 1990s, I talked with the building manager, the restaurant manager, and she told me that she had had trouble with the staff because she would come in the morning and the tables would not be cleaned, bussed, and reset for the lunch crowd. So she was yelling at her staff until finally one of them said to her, "Listen, we're not lazy, but what's happening is when we're setting up and cleaning up, we'll start hearing footsteps pacing back and forth on that second floor hallway. And we know it's General Sully. We know it's Alfred Sully. And when that happens, we're just going to go home. You can fire us. It doesn't matter." And she didn't believe them. And so she told them that they were all just crazy and that it was the ice machine, until one night when she was up here on the second floor in her office doing the paperwork. Her office door was open and she heard, not the ice machine, but she heard footsteps coming toward her. From one end of the hallway all the way toward her office. And so she just sat there and looked out the open doorway, and the footsteps got closer and closer and closer. And eventually they were at the open doorway, but she didn't see anyone. She could still hear them as they continued past her, going all the way down to the other end of the hallway. And then they started coming back. And she was a lot braver than me because she didn't go home at this point. Instead, she crept up toward that open doorway, and then she waited until they were maybe 5 or 10 feet away, and she jumped out into the hallway, right in the center of the hallway. Now the footsteps, she told me, they didn't stop, they didn't get faster, they didn't get slower, they just kept coming at the same pace, closer and closer until they were right at her. And then she just felt this iciness on the front of her face, and that icy cold went through her body and out her back. It was at that point she decided it's time to go home. And she did. Years later, a decade later, I came back here to the Grant House and I talked with people about the hauntings. And by then, people reported actually seeing a ghost, an apparition, somebody that they believe is Alfred Sully. One morning on a Sunday, the chef got permission to make his family kind of a light buffet breakfast on the veranda. And they were all eating, and his sister got up and said, I have to use the bathroom. She left the table, went went to the front of the house, let herself in, and when she closed the door, she looked to her right, and she saw a man inside looking at the window at her family. And she said to him, "Can I help you, sir?" And he turned to look at her, and she described him as an ordinary-looking man, tall, thin. He had graying hair and a long beard. The only thing unusual was he was wearing this long wool coat, and it went down to about mid-thigh on him. But he looked at her and said, no, thank you. I used to live here. I'm just looking around." And she said, "Oh, okay." And she continued on her way, went to use the bathroom. And then she came back. She didn't see him. So she went out onto the veranda and walked up to her brother and said, "Who's the man that was in the house?" And he said, "What man?" And she said, "The one who used to live here." And he got surprised and kind of upset. And he said, "This has been a restaurant for decades. Nobody has actually lived in this building for maybe 50 years or longer." And so they went and searched the entire Grant House restaurant. And because this is a series of ghost stories, they didn't find anybody. Many, many other ghosts here at the Grant House. A little boy, even an invisible ghostly dog that people hear but they never see. So that's why this is one of my especially favorite public places in all the Pacific Northwest.
The West Coast is known for its fad diets and physical neuroses, but no one does it quite like Washington. Suck it, California. That's right. Here in Washington State, we have the story of Starvation Heights, a fatal health spa known for killing its members.
Remember Jared from Subway? He's inspired a lot of people.
He's looking good. He'll show you the way. His name is Jared, and he'll lead you to Subway. That's where it goes, along with the rest. For 7 sandwiches with 6 grams of fat or less.
What an inspiration. Subway. Eat fresh.
Hi, I'm Kook Teflon, and I live here in Seattle. I'm an artist and I'm a filmmaker, and for 5 years I was one of the ghost tour guides of Pike Place Market. And so I want to share with you a little bit of the history of Seattle's first serial killer, Linda Hazard. Yes, she was a woman. She was also a doctor and an author. She'd written a book called Fasting for the Cure of Disease. She believed if you fasted, your toxins would exit your body and you'd feel better, which is true. But if she had something to gain from you, she would starve you until you died and then take you up to the mortuary and get you cremated because your family would know something was wrong. So she did this for a while. One of her first victims was Ivar's Fish and Chips. His mother was one of her first victims in the hotel in Pike Place Market. And how she would starve you to death is you'd check in and she'd start you on this fast immediately, which consisted of a glass of orange juice in the morning and up to 8 hours of vicious massages and enemas. She'd get you all cleaned out, and then if you were lucky, you might get a little glass of asparagus water for dinner. Now imagine this for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You are gonna be delirious, famished, out of your mind, just thinking about hamburgers, pizza, not caring about your finances or your bank accounts or your land. So what she would do is when you were delirious, she would ask you to sign over everything so your family doesn't fight over it. This is how she'd get you. And this is how she gained the properties in town and money. So this is going on for quite a while, and these two sisters, they're London heiresses. They're kind of like the Paris Hiltons of the time. They are very wealthy. Their father passes away, and they decide to travel the world. Well, while they're in Vancouver, BC, they see an ad in the paper for this wonderful doctor and this fast that'll make you feel incredible. These sisters are in their late 20s, they're vivacious, they're beautiful, and they want to try anything new. They're kind of like the Kardashians, like, hey, we got to do this if everyone else is doing it. So they get into Seattle. By this time, Linda is not working out of the market, but she is acquired a posh apartment on 5th Avenue here. And so the girls check in, they're there for 2 weeks. she's also acquired a farm in Olalla, Washington. So she starts you out downtown in these apartments, and then after a few weeks of the fast, she moves you on over to the farm, which is now known as Starvation Heights. The sisters get over to the farm, and somewhere in between had sent out a telegram to their family in London. When the family received this letter, this telegram, they realized something's wrong. There was misspelled words, didn't make a lot of sense. These were highly educated women. I know I've compared them to Paris Hilton and the Kardashians, but hey. So the family gets over here as quickly as they can. It's the 1920s, so it takes a little time. By the time they get over here and they get over to the Olalla farm, one of the sisters is dead. The one that is living is 38 pounds. 38 pounds, that's how much a 3-year-old weighs. So you can imagine how scary that was. She was basically a big skeleton with a dress. And she was not wanting to leave the farm. She said her fast wasn't over. She was so out of her mind. Well, the family wanted to see the body of the deceased sister because they just couldn't believe this would happen. These were, like I said, vivacious, healthy women. So they get over back to Pike Place Market to where the mortuary was located, and the morticians panic because they've already cremated the body. They've been doing this for Linda for years. They'd cremate the bodies so the families would not see the bodies. Most people going in for this fast weren't actually sick with like cancer or anything. They might have anxiety or insomnia, and it was more of a cleanse. That was the original idea. So they get in there, and the mortician has put a Jane Doe in the casket. And this is when Linda gets busted. But the judge doesn't believe a beautiful woman with high intelligence could do something like this. Now you gotta remember, she did this with people she could gain knowledge or gain money from. So if you went in and she didn't have anything to gain from you, you spent a week doing this fast, of course you're gonna feel better, and then you're gonna go tell everybody. So she actually had a pretty good reputation. She only does 18 months in jail, and when she gets out, her and her husband decide to go overseas for a while, let the dust settle, and when they return to start working full-time out at the Olalla farm. So they had a crematorium built, the whole 9 yards. They get back, they're working out there for a couple years. Linda starts getting older, and she decides to put herself on the fast because she's not feeling well, and she starves herself to death.
The Pacific Northwest is full of children. Thankfully, some of these children are dead. This is the tale of one such child, a Carl Green who died of typhoid in Oregon City after playing in a creek. You've heard of typhoid, Mary? Well, say hello to typhoid scary.
So one of my favorite ghost stories in Oregon City is a story of a little boy with red hair. This little boy is seen throughout the McLaughlin neighborhood, actually very much near a place called Singer Hill. It's named after a creek, Singer Creek, that used to run through the McLaughlin neighborhood. And this little boy is seen in multiple places in and around that area. He's seen in the tunnel of the elevator in the lower part of downtown Oregon City, where people say that they see him peering around the corners of the tunnel. But what's odd about it is he looks like a real little boy. People don't describe him as a ghost. They see him as a real little boy dressed in older clothes from the early 1900s. And they look around to maybe see if he's with family or a parent, and then he's gone. Other people going up the staircase between the two levels of the city near the creek at night talk about hearing laughter or a little kid playing in the trees near the creek. Others just generally talk about hearing children playing at night. So for many, many years, we've tried to figure out, who is this little boy? Who is this little boy? The legend that I have always heard is that there's a little boy named Carl Green. And that little boy grew up in the McLaughlin neighborhood, that he explored the area near his home, that he played in Singer Creek. And like a lot of the other children who played in the creek, he got very sick. That Carl Green got typhoid from the creek, and many believed he died from it. And maybe that's why he's still there. Maybe that's why he's still seen around the creek playing, why people still hear him at night. That he just wants to be there. That's a place that he just grew up and he loves. What's also interesting is across the street from where this little boy was said to grow up is a mural. And that mural shows Oregon City in its early history. It's a mural that was painted from an early photograph of Oregon City. But what's odd about it is there's this little boy that has been added to the mural. A little boy that we know wasn't in the original photograph. This little boy also has red hair, also dressed very much the same way that people describe this little Carl Green or this little boy. And he's coming up from the riverbank as if he's been playing in the river, even drinking the water from the river. So why does he appear in this mural? And why does he appear in the neighborhood? Is it really Carl Green? So if you're ever exploring the area near Singer Creek in Oregon City and you stumble across a little boy with red hair, let him know that Rocky and many of us in Oregon City want to know who he is. Are you really Carl Green, or are you someone else?
So we're here filming Ron Patton as the ghost of Carl Green, and something really weird just happened in front of us. Allie, can you say what happened?
Well, we were walking down the stairs and talking about our next scene, and I saw a stick just sitting right here, and as I looked at it, it just flew over here, and this is the stick right here, and there's no way, like, it wasn't like perched like it was gonna fall, and it didn't just fall, it just flew like that. It was weird. I think it was Carl Green.
I saw it too. It seemed deliberate. It looked like it was just thrown across the stairs right in front of us.
Hi, Carl.
That's really creepy. Because I thought you dropped the one of our props.
No.
And I turned around and you were all, everybody was like, oh my God, what happened?
It violently flew off the hill. It was Carl.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. I don't think he wanted to hurt us. I think he just wanted to say hi.
Yeah. But hey, I don't look like that.
Hi. That was me, really. It was psychokinesis. And I made it happen because I'm Carl Green. Am I a good boy? Who knows?
Happy Halloween, you bastards. You've just witnessed 4 bone-chilling tales from the Pacific Northwest. Tales of utter terror. Well, not quite utter terror. Not as terrible as the I-5 corridor, but still, pretty scary stuff. If you'd like to see something even more terrifying, stay tuned, subscribe to Pacific North Weird, and watch our upcoming Christmas special, where I will be presenting myself as my drag persona, Menstrual Krampus. Happy Halloween from Pacific North Weird.